Okay everybody, this session is going to focus on the postmodernist view of education, which is actually quite a high level theory. In the past this theory would have only briefly been covered, however it's now becoming part of a key element of the specification, and that's because the course is a 2-year thing and you'll be assessed at this at second year. This is something that you'll be expected to know. So actually now this has gone from being something that was only slightly taught in the past at this early stage, compared to now something that you need to know. So, because we've done a bit of hard work on postmodernism already, this should make sense. I'm not going to go through a lot of the background stuff. If you are sat there now thinking, what on earth is postmodernism, get yourself onto the earlier video from the Introduction to Sociology module and watch that session. However, I'm going to go specifically straight into the education stuff after a very brief recap. So, when I say brief, I mean brief at this stage. So, the clues in the name of postmodernism split into postmodernism. Post means after. Modernism is talking about the period of time after industrialisation, which is in the 1800s. Now what you'll find is a lot of the theories that we've studied together are modernist theories, so postmodernism is suggesting that all those old modernist theories are out of date. Alright? Now the thing that's triggered that change, they say, is globalisation. Which if you remember, globalisation refers to the decline of national borders, decline of national borders. And therefore, as a result, the world is connected as well. And they believe, like industrialisation was the thing that made the big change from a modernist era before modernism to modernism, globalisation is the thing that's triggered the change to postmodernism. If you remember, we talked about 3 different types of globalisation in our introduction before. So for example, things like cultural globalisation, which is things like food, music, people that move around the world, and that's globalisation, which causes a lot of change. Economic globalisation, all the money in society and the jobs that go with it. I'm going to put that, the jobs. Jobs are now globalised, you can work all over the world, and these are the things we talk about. Then political globalisation. So big governments working together around the world. For example, the European Union is a great illustration. Now, postmodernists argue all of those things have changed the whole nature of our society, which is why all the old theories are out of date. Theorist Leotard says that specifically, and again, this is stuff that we already know. It's going to be a very brief version of this, but it's all relevant to today. So what he argues is that in his opinion, all the old theories, modernist theories, e.g. functionalism, Marxism, feminism, etc., are all completely out of date today, and therefore have no relevancy at all today. They are out of date, and as a consequence he calls them meta-narratives. Big old stories that no longer have any relevancy today, and the reasons why they're meta-narratives, there's 2 reasons for this. First reason, number 1, is that knowledge is relative to the individual. What he means by that is that society today is completely fragmented, broken up into loads of different pieces. And what he argues is no one really cares about anybody else anymore. Everybody is a complete individual. They have their own idea of what's right and what's wrong, and they need to have their own individual experience of everything because that's the way that the world is today. Knowledge is relative to us because we all have our own understanding of what's true and what isn't. And as a result, we can't say that everyone has the same experiences because that's not the case anymore. Again, more detail, look at the video online. The second reason why things are meta-narratives today is because identities are fluid. They can change. So things like, that's not very good, things like social class, no longer really an issue today because that can change. If you're raised in a working class household, doesn't mean you're going to be working class forever today. People have the opportunity to progress, and as a result, class doesn't really mean anything anymore. Same with things like gender. Do gender stereotypes really have a difference today? Do they really make an impact? Does it really matter if you're born a man or a woman in today's society because everybody's such an individual? These are the things that they talk about, and of course this is a really crash course. Explaining postmodernism and Leotard in 2 minutes is a very difficult thing to do. you've got a whole lesson from a previous section that's all about postmodernism. I would strongly advise that if you're struggling with this, that you check that out ASAP. Now, we're now going to link their theory to education. So in your notes, please, the postmodernist view of education. And there's only going to be 2 studies. Now, this is going to sound really complicated to start off with, but I promise you it's actually quite straightforward once you get your head around the complicated stuff. So let's explain that to start off with. So, to help you out in your notes, let's start with this. So, the postmodernist view of education. Alright, so let's explain it. We're going to do that with 2 theorists. The first one is a guy called Kenneth Thompson, great name. The second one is going to be a theorist called Usher et al, who we're going to talk about in a minute. I'm just going to scroll these down to give myself a bit of space to explain these things, and then we'll see how it goes from there. So, as we already know, postmodernists don't like the old theories. So these guys are going to be critical of functionalists, but more importantly, Marxists. Because from their opinion, their theories are no longer relevant today. And Kenneth Thompson explains how their view of education is no longer relevant today with some quite complicated ideas. So let's talk about those. Here we go. So what Kenneth Thompson argues is that the old theories of education are no longer relevant today because of these things. But I need to explain it. It's all linked to the economy and how it works. This might sound confusing to start off with, but please don't worry, it should hopefully make sense at the end. If you have any questions, come and see me personally or Miss Thornton, who will help you out. So, Kenneth Thompson is our theorist, he is a postmodernist. And what he argues is, there's been a real shift in the way that the economy works. He talks about the prevalence or the dominance of something called the Fordist method of production that was dominant in the past. So this is in the past. And he argues that this influenced, or this is relevant to Marxism. This is what Marxists discuss. But to do that, I'm going to have to explain what this means. The picture tries to help you out, but I'm trying to help you out with this as well. So let's start with this. The Fordist method of production gets its name for a particular reason, and it comes from the car company Ford. So for example, I drive a Ford Focus, so I drive a Ford car. Fords are some of the most popular cars in the world, and they make thousands and maybe even millions of them every single year. Now, Ford became very famous for a style of producing their cars, and it's known as line production. Now, the idea of line production is it's very efficient. And this is a picture of someone making a car. Now, this is actually a Mercedes company, but they're doing the same idea, where basically an individual wouldn't necessarily build the whole car. They would only do one job on the car, then pass that to their friend next down on the line, who would then do a different job. So for example, this guy here on the picture is sticking the Mercedes badge onto a car. Now, this guy, if he was using the Fordist method of production, wouldn't make the full car. His only job would be to stick the badges onto it. Now, that makes him a specialist at what he does. He only sticks that badge onto that car and then passes it on to his mate who might do something else. So for example, currently this car in this picture doesn't have any wheels on it, so his mate next to him might just put the wheels on. Now the problem is for this guy here, who puts the badges on, that's all he does every day. Now, for the first 10 minutes of doing that job, it's probably quite good fun, sticking the badge on and sending it on to his mate. After a day of doing that, probably get quite boring of just sticking this badge onto this car and passing it on. After a year of doing that, it would start to get a bit bored, maybe start to realise where his life's going. After 10 years of sticking badges on cars, you can imagine how he feels. Now basically, this is what Marxists say the education system's all about, and this is the type of jobs that people are preparing them for. Marxists like Bowles and Gintis and people like that would argue that this kind of work is boring. Of course it is. It doesn't make you feel part of what it's all about. They'd use fancy terms like feeling alienated. I've spelled that wrong. All that means is that you don't really care about what you're doing because you hate it. And that work's really naff. Because all he's doing is sticking a badge on the car every single day, forever and ever and ever. And as a result, that's not going to get you anywhere. Now, if you remember, that's what Marxists said about the education system, that education prepares you for that kind of work because education is boring, it doesn't make you care about it, you hate it, and all that kind of stuff, because it's preparing you for the future workplace. That was the past. And Kenneth Thompson argues, yes, Marxism may have had some relevancy in the past, because that's how it was. However, things have changed. And therefore, as a result, that idea is no longer relevant today. And he calls it the post-Fordist method of production. Remember, post just means after. So what he's saying is we're now after the Fordist method of production, and things have now changed. And it's all because of globalisation, which links together to the main core of the theory. Globalisation is the idea that the whole world connects together as one. And what he means by that is that, look, in the past, we had a lot of manufacturing jobs in the UK, working in factories, making things, making cars and stuff like that. However, now, that doesn't happen very often now because of globalisation. Most of our manufacturing has now gone abroad because it's cheaper to do it that way because of globalisation. So as a result, there's not many manufacturing jobs left in the country anymore, and as a result, people don't make things like this anymore in our country. There is exceptions, of course there is. What they're arguing is the majority of people who work in factories now don't work in factories anymore, because most of those factories have gone. Now, there's a change in the economy. Now, the majority of jobs at the low end of society are not part of the manufacturing sector, they're part of what we call the service sector. Because these are the types of jobs that dominate in our society today. Service sector jobs are the type of jobs about things like customer service. You know, working in things like retail, you know, like working in a shop or a call centre. You know, if you dropped out of college today, you wouldn't get a job in a factory like you would in the 1970s. Today, the type of job you would get would be working in customer service or working in a shop or something like that. Now, the thing is, with these jobs, is that they're not the same as those old manufacturing jobs. They're not the same experience every day. The thing is because every customer is different, you as the employer have to provide them with a different service. So let's say, for example, if you worked in retail, let's say, for example, like my favourite example is what I used to do, if you worked at McDonald's, think about every customer. Do they always order the same things? No, they don't. They all order different things. Every customer has different needs. So if you're stood there, you might be ordering one person who wants a Big Mac meal, for example, but then the next person after that might want a cheeseburger. The next person might be a vegetarian, so you give them a salad. I know that's unlikely, but you know. And all these ideas that every customer is completely different, as opposed to the past, where people working in factories would do the same thing every single time, work was boring, and education prepared them for that. Whereas what Kenneth Thompson argues is that's now changed. The jobs have now changed in society. So if education prepares people for the workplace, which it does, it has to do it differently today. In the past, they prepare you for the workplace by everyone having the same experience. It'd be boring, it'd be mundane, and it'd all be preparing you for this future work in a factory. That was the idea. Whereas what Kenneth Thompson says is that now education prepares you for a different type of workplace in the service sector. And as a result, the education system has to mirror the workplace. So therefore, today, education must be customised to the needs of all students, so that when you go into the workplace as an adult, you are used to this fact that everyone has to have a customised experience. So you all don't have the same experience, but actually you're given this customised way of having education that's individual to your needs, and as a result helping you out, just like the person at McDonald's is helping each customer out in the way that they do that. Now that's what he calls the post-Fordist method of production. That's what he calls the post-Fordist method of production, because it's completely different to what's happened in the past. Now, that's what he believes that education still prepares people for the workplace, but it's a different type of workplace to what Marxists in particular talked about, and therefore would criticise Marxists like Bose and Guinness, but also functionists as well, for being too generalised about education. Now finally, Usher et al., not the real Usher of course, but sociologist called Usher, et al. Just means and others, who was working with other sociologists that just weren't as famous as he was, so he got the most recognition. Usher et al. Is a postmodernist who agrees with what Kenneth Thompson talks about. And what Usher et al. Do is they provide examples of how education is customised to meet the needs of each individual student. He gives loads of examples. Now in class obviously we'll talk about loads of different types, but I'll just give you some really hardcore examples now. So for example, e.g. do a different colour. So let's talk about these. So for example, you've got the choice of school. Today, you can choose whichever school you want to go to. You chose to come to this college, for example. You could have gone to any college. You weren't told which one to go to. That gave you choice. You can pick a college or a school that meets your needs, and therefore you go. An example of that would be the development of specialist schools. So a specialist school, it's usually in high schools where they specialise in a particular area. For example, you may have gone to a high school that specialised in performing arts or science and technology or IT. And the idea is you go to a school that suits the specialism that you're interested in. Again, it gives you more choice and freedom. It suits your individual needs. But there's other things, like vocational education. What I mean by that is that work-based education. In the past that didn't exist, whereas now, if you don't want to do academic subject areas, you can go do vocational education, learn to be a builder, or learn to be a hairdresser, or learn to be an electrician. And there's all these different forms of education today that suit the individual needs of students. Again, you could talk about things like, I don't know, one-to-one tuition. The teachers now, it's standard practice for teachers to try and help you out, to basically give you everything you need in education. So our equivalent of that at college are these one-to-one reviews that we do all the time to try and help you progress and set your targets. But there's other examples like access to university. You know, today you can access university in loads of different ways. More people can go to university, whereas in the past people couldn't. But you can even do it online these days. The fact that you're sat watching this lesson online shows how people can access education in lots of different ways that are customised to your individual needs. Finally, you know, things like, what was my other example? Access to university or adult education. You know, if you screw up your education because this isn't the right time for you, and in 10 years' time decide you want your A-level in sociology, you can go study it somewhere because people have that opportunity to study it at a time that's relevant for them. So as a result, education is now completely customised to the individual needs of students. To finish this off, this slide says, how can these ideas be applied to functions of Marxism? The problem with both of these theories is they claim that all students have the same experiences. Is that true? Well, no, it's not. And postmodernists are arguing that every individual now has their own customised experience, which explains their theory of education. So that is the theory of education from a postmodernist perspective. Again, if you have any questions, please let me know. It's quite complicated ones. The other ones are a lot more simplistic than that. If you have any questions, please ask either myself or Miss Thornton, and we'll be more than happy to help. Thank you.